History teaches that the Titanic sank because of ice, arrogance, engineering flaws. But the truth buried beneath archives, sealed logs, and terrified testimonies tells a different story, one that traces directly to a secret war fought long before you were born. A war between those who feared your arrival and those who foresaw it. The Titanic was not just a ship. It was a container of destinies, a vessel carrying individuals whose bloodlines would one day intersect with yours, guide you, protect you, or awaken you. And your enemies, those ancient, shadowed factions threatened by your lineage, knew it. In the decades leading up to 1912, certain intelligence circles and esoteric societies discovered prophecies describing a future soul, you, whose awakening would destabilize their control over governments, wealth, and spiritual authority. They believed that preventing your lineage from aligning was the only way to maintain their influence. To them, every ancestor who could strengthen your future awakening was a threat. And on the Titanic, several such bloodlines sailed unknowingly toward their fate. Innovators, healers, visionaries, women carrying unborn children tied to your spiritual genealogy. None of them knew the ocean was already being manipulated against them. Secret memos recovered years later, too controversial to release, suggest that a small coalition of powerful men, obsessed with preserving their dynasty, saw the voyage as an opportunity. They knew who was aboard. They knew whose survival would strengthen the lineage that would eventually produce you. They believed eliminating these individuals would weaken the future chosen one long before their birth. And so the Titanic was marked, not by weather, not by fate, but by intention. Mother Shipton's hidden prophecies hinted at a great vessel of royal steel, felled not by nature but by fear of a child yet unborn. Historians brushed this off as metaphor, but underground scholars understood exactly what she meant. You were not the target, but the future version of you was. Your enemies thought they could fracture the timeline by drowning the seeds before the tree could grow. But here is where their plan collapsed. Your destiny doesn't come from one bloodline, it radiates across many. The people they feared most were not all on that ship. The bloodlines they sought to break had already scattered, hidden, strengthened. Trying to stop your future awakening by sabotaging a single event was like trying to stop a storm by snapping one lightning bolt in half. When the Titanic struck the iceberg, survivors reported something strange, an eerie stillness between the impact and the panic, as if the ocean itself held its breath. Some swore they saw lights beneath the surface. Others felt an invisible pressure in the air, like the world momentarily shifted its axis. Researchers later identified unexplained energy spikes registered by early wireless systems that night. No one could explain them, but esoteric historians believed these anomalies were not random. They were the universe recalibrating because the timeline had been attacked. What your enemies never expected was that the tragedy meant to weaken your lineage actually strengthened it. Those who survived carried trauma that awakened dormant gifts. Those who perished shifted into roles of spiritual guardians long before your incarnation. Entire branches of your ancestry were reshaped, rerouted, refined, forming the exact combination needed for your eventual arrival. Your enemies tried to break you before you existed. Instead, they forged you. And deep in forgotten logs, one chilling line remains from an unnamed officer who survived the sinking. It felt as though something powerful was not allowed to reach the shore. They were wrong. You reached it. You were born. You awakened. The very disaster meant to erase you ended up proving you were inevitable. Long before the Titanic set sail, There were individuals whose names never appeared on any public manifest, men and women quietly escorted aboard under aliases, carrying documents, relics, and coded information tied directly to ancient bloodline prophecies. These weren't celebrities, politicians, or wealthy heirs. These were keepers, descendants of families tasked with protecting spiritual knowledge that would eventually be needed by a soul born in the future, you. They boarded the Titanic because they were meeting in New York for a gathering known only as the Alignment Council, a meeting scheduled every century to review shifts in destiny lines. Your enemies knew this. They intercepted letters, decoded communications, and realized that several key guardians, people who carried ancient knowledge your future self would one day need, were converging on the same ship. And to those who feared your eventual awakening, this was not a coincidence. It was a danger. They believed that if they could dissolve these guardians before they exchanged information, your future path would fragment. That you would awaken alone, without guidance, without spiritual memory, without protection. Their fear wasn't you. It was what you would become once your lineage reconnected with its forgotten wisdom. That is why the Titanic became the target. A single strike, a single night, a single accident could change the course of centuries. But the Guardians were not naive. Shipton's texts, Mayan stelae, and Egyptian star maps had all warned them that dark forces would attempt a preemptive strike on the lineage of the Chosen One. That is why several Guardians boarded with sealed letters meant for future descendants, messages intended to survive even if they did not. Some of these letters washed ashore in metal lockboxes months later, though their contents were confiscated before reaching the public. One documented line remains in a private archive. If we fall, another rises. The line cannot be severed. The chosen will still come. Your enemies thought eliminating the Guardians would erase the knowledge they carried. But knowledge tied to destiny never dies, it transfers. This is why certain traits in you emerged despite no one teaching them. Why your intuition matured faster than your environment. Why you've always known things you shouldn't logically know. You inherited what they couldn't deliver. And here is the part most historians refuse to acknowledge. Multiple passengers reported seeing unfamiliar individuals being escorted into lower decks by security, men in tailored coats without luggage, women carrying metal cases locked with geometric symbols. They were never seen again after boarding. Their cabins were never identified. Their names never appeared. But survivors remembered their faces with unsettling clarity. Even stranger, shortly after the impact, several passengers claimed to hear a low-frequency hum coming from below deck, a vibration so deep it rattled windows. Some thought it was the engines failing. But modern acoustic researchers insist the engines could not have produced that frequency. It resembled resonance, like something ancient reacting to a timeline shift. Shipton warned that when an event threatens the destiny of the Chosen One, the universe responds immediately, sending a correction wave through reality. And the survivors described something eerily similar, an unnatural stillness, a sense of being suspended between moments, as if time hesitated. Your enemies believed the sinking weakened your timeline. Instead, it triggered the universe to fortify it. Every guardian lost became a spiritual protector. Every relic lost became encoded into the collective memory of your lineage. Every secret drowned became a seed your soul would recover through intuition rather than instruction. They tried to disrupt your destiny. They ended up guaranteeing it. Because destiny does not bend to sabotage. It adapts, evolves, and prepares. In the months before the Titanic sailed, there was one man, an archivist with access to forbidden genealogical maps, who discovered something so disturbing that he attempted to stop the ship's maiden voyage altogether. His name has been erased from textbooks, but fragments of his correspondence remain in private collections. In those letters, he warned that several passengers carried unbroken lineage markers tied to an ancient prophecy concerning a future soul destined to dismantle oppressive systems. He didn't know your name, but he recognized your pattern, the same pattern Mother Shipton saw centuries earlier. He described these lineage markers as threads of a living star, a metaphor dismissed by his peers until they realized he was referring to an advanced form of genealogical resonance, the kind passed through intuition, dreams, and energetic imprint rather than DNA alone. He believed that if these key ancestors reached New York safely, the convergence of their destinies would accelerate the timeline leading to the birth of the chosen descendant, you. To him, this was good news. To the factions controlling wealth and influence, it was a threat. When the archivist attempted to present his findings to government officials, he was discreetly removed from his post. His research lab was shut down overnight. His home was searched. His journals confiscated. The authorities claimed he was unstable, delusional, but the truth was far simpler. He had stumbled upon a prophecy your enemies desperately needed to suppress. They could not risk the convergence of those bloodlines. They could not allow the chosen descendant to inherit an unbroken web of protection, intuition, and spiritual memory. This is why the voyage pushed forward, despite warnings about ice fields, despite engineers' concerns, despite crew members reporting unusual mechanical readings prior to departure. Something about the Titanic felt rushed, as if someone behind the scenes needed that ship on the ocean, not for pride, not for luxury, but for interception. And yet, what your enemies misunderstood is that fate does not work like a fragile thread that can be cut. Fate works like a river. Block one branch, and the water finds another way. The archivist wrote in his final letter, smuggled to a colleague days before the disaster. They can sink the ship, but they cannot sink the soul meant to rise centuries later. The child of convergence is beyond their reach. This sentence terrified the small circle of elites monitoring his research. They realized, perhaps for the first time, that prophecy doesn't depend on perfect circumstances. It depends on inevitability. And you were inevitable. Meanwhile, survivors of the Titanic later reported strange details that were never included in official record. One woman insisted she saw a group of men standing on the bow minutes before impact, men who were not part of the crew and who vanished moments after the iceberg was spotted. Another survivor claimed she heard a language she couldn't recognize being spoken urgently below deck, as if orders were being issued. These accounts were dismissed as trauma-induced hallucinations, but they align with reports from crew members who saw people boarding the ship at the last minute under military escort. Your enemies weren't improvising. They were executing a plan. Yet the universe was executing one too. Because while they believed the catastrophe would delay or weaken your eventual incarnation, the opposite occurred. Traumatic events generate spiritual shockwaves, and shockwaves often awaken dormant gifts within a lineage. Instead of fracturing your ancestry, the tragedy activated it. The trauma carried forward became intuition. The grief became empathy. The survival instinct became spiritual strength. The memory of loss became the memory of purpose. Everything your enemies did to stop you became the very thing that shaped you. Had the archivist seen the future, he would have understood the greatest truth of all. Your timeline cannot be stopped by sabotage. It cannot be altered by fear. It cannot be silenced by violence. Destiny does not negotiate. The archivist vanished soon after the disaster, His disappearance ruled a suicide. But decades later, his personal chest was found sealed beneath the floorboards of a demolished building. Inside were two items: a map of interconnected bloodlines leading forward in time, and a note that read, "To the one who completes this web, I believed in you before the world existed to receive you." Decades after the Titanic sank, engineers studying the ship's recovered schematics noticed something peculiar, something that should not have been there. Etched faintly into several internal structural plates were geometric patterns that did not match any known engineering marks of the era. These were not measurements, not assembly codes, not signatures. They were glyphs, symbols identical to those found in Atlantean ruins, Sumerian star tablets, and pre-dynastic Egyptian carvings. No one could explain how they ended up on a ship built in a Belfast shipyard in 1911. But esoteric historians could. They recognized the glyphs immediately. They were part of an ancient protection grid designed to preserve the integrity of bloodlines connected to prophecy. These glyphs act as anchors in the timeline, preventing certain destinies from being erased. And carved within one of them, barely visible, almost erased by corrosion, was a symbol Shipton herself sketched centuries before your birth. A symbol representing your lineage. The moment this discovery was made, the documents were seized by intelligence agencies under the pretext of national historical security. But the researchers knew what they had seen. A few left behind cryptic notes before authorities silenced them. The ship carried more than passengers. It carried a blueprint. Someone marked the vessel to ensure the line survived. Your enemies believed they orchestrated the disaster, but the symbols told a different story. Someone on the inside, someone who understood the prophecy, was working against them. It appears that while dark forces tried to eliminate key bloodlines by gathering them on one ship, another force intervened, embedding Atlantean glyphs into the Titanic's frame to redirect the outcome. This is why the tragedy did not achieve its intended purpose. This is why survivors followed patterns of fate that strengthened your lineage. This is why certain individuals felt guided to lifeboats they shouldn't have reached. This is why stories of miraculous escapes echo across survivor testimonies. The glyphs created a spiritual buffer, not to prevent the sinking, but to ensure the lives that mattered to your timeline were preserved or transformed in the exact way destiny required. According to restricted analyses later leaked, several survivors displayed unusual patterns in their descendants. Highly intuitive children, adults with unexplained premonitions, healers and dreamers with no formal training, individuals who felt guided by an inner compass. These traits appear consistently among those connected to the chosen lineage, your lineage. Your enemies assumed that by sinking the Titanic, they were closing the chapter. They believed eliminating physical bodies meant eliminating spiritual trajectories. What they never understood is that destiny is not an object, it is a frequency. When threatened, it adapts. Some descendants who were meant to perish survived instead. Some who were meant to remain ordinary emerged spiritually awakened. Some families gained clarity and courage they never had before. Trauma reshaped your ancestry into something sharper, deeper, harder to mislead. Even more unnerving is a recovered testimony from a shipbuilder who worked on the Titanic. He claimed that certain plates arrived pre-stamped with symbols no one on the crew recognized. When they attempted to sand them off, the symbols reappeared. They dismissed it as a manufacturing quirk, until they returned the next day to find new glyphs appearing across other sections of the hull. He said, "It was as if the ship wanted to mark itself." Of course, no one believed him. But the glyphs survived the ocean. and they point to one truth. The Titanic did not sink because your enemies were powerful. It sank because the universe used the event to restructure your timeline in a way they could never control. What they intended as sabotage became architecture. What they meant as destruction became design. What they used as a weapon became your awakening. Behind the polished history, behind the respectable narratives and maritime tragedy, there was another layer, one that never made it into textbooks. A group of your ancient enemies, operating through secret societies tied to early banking dynasties, performed a ritual the night before the Titanic sailed. They believed the ship carried bloodlines whose survival would strengthen the future chosen one, you, and they intended to break that chain. Their ritual was designed to cloud intuition, dull spiritual senses, and prevent key passengers from recognizing danger until it was too late. It was not a spell of death, it was a spell of confusion. But here is where their plan failed spectacularly. They didn't understand that your lineage carries a built-in rebound mechanism, an ancient energetic law older than magic, older than religion, older than curses themselves. Attempts to sabotage your ancestry do not simply fail, they reflect. Like mirrors forged in cosmic fire, your bloodline returns harm to sender with amplified force. The ritual they performed did not confuse the passengers it targeted. Instead, it fractured the spiritual shields of the men performing it. Documents recovered from private collections describe what happened that night. Within hours of completing the ritual, several participants reported migraines, hallucinations, violent nausea, uncontrollable trembling. One collapsed and whispered, "Something looked back at us." They believed they were invoking darkness as a weapon, but instead they awakened a protective force tied to your lineage, something that strikes only when provoked. Witness accounts claim that one of the men saw a shadow beside him that wasn't his, a tall figure standing still even as he moved. The curse was never meant for your ancestors. The curse was meant to stop itself. When individuals with malicious intent target a chosen lineage, they essentially trigger an ancient safeguard, one that predates civilization. This safeguard is not a spiritual being. It is not an angel, not a demon, not a guardian spirit. It is the echo of your own future self, a consciousness outside linear time that corrects attacks long before they reach you. The men who conducted the ritual had no idea they were entering a frequency far beyond their control. Historical notes say that two key members of the ritual group canceled their passage at the last moment due to sudden illness. In reality, both reported seeing visions of drowning, fire, and a pair of eyes watching them from beneath the waves. They interpreted these visions as warnings. They were correct. The ritual backfired, and they became the targets of their own energy. Not one of the group ever recovered spiritually. Several died under mysterious circumstances within 2 years, their families reporting erratic behavior, whispers of guilt, and dreams they refused to describe. Meanwhile, your ancestors, those who were meant to survive, did so in ways that defied logic. Some changed cabins at the last minute. Some were pulled into lifeboats by strangers who felt compelled. Some inexplicably woke moments before the collision. Others reported hearing internal voices urging them to move, to climb, to step away. These were not coincidences. They were corrections, your timeline protecting itself. Mother Shipton hinted at this mechanism when she wrote, "The flame yet unborn is guarded by time itself. That which seeks its fall shall fall first." Your enemies believed they were dealing with destiny as if it were fragile, malleable, subject to sabotage. They failed to realize that chosen destinies are structural, woven into reality across dimensions. Trying to break your lineage is like trying to break gravity. The harder they push, the harder the universe pushes back. What truly destroyed them was not guilt. It was resonance. When someone attacks a chosen lineage, they amplify their own shadow. Their fears, their greed, their hatred, all intensify until their own lives collapse under the weight of their intent. This is why conspiracy networks tied to the Titanic disaster fractured in the years following. Members betrayed one another. Wealth was lost. Families fell apart. Institutions crumbled. They believed they destroyed your future. But in trying, they destroyed their own. Because the truth is this: no curse, no ritual, no weapon can touch a lineage designed to produce a soul like you. And every attempt to break you only reveals how indestructible you truly are. In the aftermath of the Titanic disaster, investigators were shocked to discover something that made no logical sense. 3 prominent figures who were confirmed to be aboard the ship simply disappeared from every official record. No bodies recovered, no personal effects, no testimonies, no listing in casualty logs. It was as if they never existed. But they did exist. Your enemies made sure of that. And the reason they erased these individuals was chillingly simple. Each one of them carried knowledge about a prophecy that pointed directly to you. These 3 individuals, known in underground archives only as the Navigator, the Cipher, and the Witness, were part of a secret spiritual lineage tracing back to star maps older than any civilization. Their ancestors once guarded celestial charts, Atlantean memory scripts, and encoded genealogical sequences that predicted when and where the chosen soul, your soul, would incarnate. They were not on the Titanic by accident. They were traveling to deliver encrypted materials to a group in New York who had been preparing for your eventual arrival generations early. Your enemies couldn't allow that meeting to happen. Though the passengers were officially listed under harmless occupations, a cartographer, a mathematician, a journalist, none of those roles were true. Their real identities were far more significant. According to rare documents smuggled out of a private archive, all 3 possessed fragments of the luminous record, an ancient prophecy older than the Bible, older than Egypt, older than Sumer. This record didn't merely predict your birth. It mapped the spiritual architecture of your consciousness, your strengths, your trials, your awakening cycles, and the moment your enemies would lose their grip on this world. Had those fragments reached New York, they would have been decoded by scholars who understood star frequencies, sacred geometry, and vibrational signatures tied to reincarnating souls. In other words, they would have known exactly who you were the moment you were born. You would have grown up connected to your truth decades earlier. Your awakening would have ignited sooner. And the systems your enemies built to limit humanity's consciousness would have collapsed long before they were ready to lose control. This is why they intervened. This is why the Titanic became their battlefield. But here is the part they never anticipated. You do not need the fragments. You are the fragment. The luminous record is stored within you, encoded in your intuition, your memories, your déjà vu, your uncanny ability to see through deception, your magnetic pull towards spiritual truth. They believed killing the carriers would extinguish the flame. Instead, the flame moved inward into you. And while those 3 individuals vanished from public record, their energy didn't vanish. Their lineage, their knowledge, their protection transferred to the future descendant destined to complete what they began. To this day, archivists cannot explain why these 3 names disappeared so cleanly. No ledger entries, no ticket stubs, no insurance claims, no personal letters reaching home. But a hidden memorandum from a private investigative team hints at the truth. certain passengers were not lost to the ocean. They were lost to history by human hands. The navigator's descendants later reported recurring dreams of star maps and symbols they never learned. The cipher's bloodline produced intuitive geniuses who solved problems without formulas. The witness's lineage gave rise to truth-tellers whose voices shook institutions. And all three bloodlines eventually intersected, through marriages, migrations, and chance encounters, until they converged into a single point: you. What your enemies tried to erase became the foundation of your awakening. What they removed from paper was carried in spirit. What they drowned in the Atlantic rose again in your consciousness. Because prophecy does not vanish when ink disappears. Prophecy lives in the soul it was written for. In the deepest classified vaults of maritime archives, there is a single page stamped with 3 labels: restricted, anomalous, and not for public release. The document describes something that happened moments before the Titanic fully disappeared beneath the Atlantic, something the surviving crew refused to speak of publicly. Amid the chaos, the screams, and the frigid night air, multiple officers reported seeing a light beneath the ship. Not fire. Not lanterns. A pulse, spreading outward like a rippling ring, as if the ocean itself was reacting to an unseen presence. For decades, officials dismissed it as reflections or shock-induced hallucinations. But hidden commentary from analysts reveals the truth. The pulse coincided perfectly with the moment the last of the 3 guardians, the navigator, the cipher, and the witness, released the final spark of their ancestral knowledge into the timeline before their physical forms were lost. That pulse was the transfer of destiny, the moment your enemies lost control of the narrative. They sank a ship, not realizing they had awakened a prophecy. Mother Shipton's lost prophecies hinted at this event when she wrote, "A great vessel shall descend, yet from its fall shall rise a light that cannot be drowned." That light was not the ship. It was not the passengers. It was you, the soul whose arrival had already been written across centuries. She warned that your enemies would strike early, strike blindly, and strike in fear, but she said nothing about them succeeding. Because she knew something they did not. Your destiny is buoyant. It rises no matter how deep they try to sink it. This is why your life has always felt strangely guided, even in the darkest moments. Why you survived trials that should have broken you. Why people who tried to destroy you ultimately destroyed themselves. Why opportunities appeared for you at the exact second they were needed. Never early, never late. Your entire lineage has been water-tested, storm-tested, darkness-tested. What your enemies didn't understand is that you are built from the fragments of survivors, those who climbed into lifeboats, those who held their children above freezing water, those who shared the last piece of bread, those who prayed over collapsing deck. You inherited resilience that was forged in tragedy, sharpened by grief, and sanctified by sacrifice. This is why emotional storms do not drown you. Why betrayal does not define you. Why loss does not end you. You carry the DNA of endurance, and the soul of inevitability. Your enemies thought the sinking of the Titanic would weaken the lineage that would one day produce you. Instead, it purged the lineage of anything that would have held you back. Trauma became intuition. Loss became wisdom. Pain became depth. The ocean did not take from you, it prepared you. And the most unsettling truth for those who once conspired against your existence is this. You were born from a timeline they tried to destroy. You walk with ancestors they tried to erase. You rise with knowledge they tried to bury. You shine with a purpose they tried to drown. The Titanic did not sink to stop you. The Titanic sank because stopping you is impossible. Every attempt your enemies made became fuel. Every tragedy became alignment. Every sabotage became recalibration. And every prophecy they feared is now unfolding. Not in books, not in institutions, but in you, the one soul they underestimated across centuries. Mother Shipton ended her final sealed prophecy with a line historians never released but archivists whisper about even today. The child of the rising waters shall break the age of fear, for they are carried by the currents of destiny itself. The currents didn't destroy you. They delivered you.